There are places in the United States where flying a small plane across an invisible line can get you intercepted by armed fighter jets, and where even trained American military pilots have been grounded, investigated, or disciplined for crossing that line by accident. Some of this airspace begins at the height of the grass and rises straight up with no ceiling at all, no altitude high enough to legally pass over the top of it. On the aeronautical charts that every pilot in the country is legally required to carry, these places are simply blanked out. Ringed in blue, hatched over, marked with nothing but a code where an explanation ought to be. Most people never think about the sky this way. We imagine the air above a country as open, free, a place with no fences. It is not. The airspace over the United States is mapped, divided, and governed as carefully as the ground beneath it. And scattered across that map are pockets where the ordinary rules stop, and something much harder takes over. Cross into one of them without permission, and, at minimum, you have committed a federal violation that can cost you your pilot's license. Cross into the wrong one, over the wrong site, at the wrong moment, and the response can involve armed interception and a very serious conversation on the ground afterward. There are two kinds of line here, and the difference matters, so hold on to it as we go. A restricted area, marked on the charts with the letter R, means the airspace is dangerous or sensitive, and you need permission from a controlling agency to cross it. Restricted usually means the hazard is real and physical. Live artillery fire, aerial gunnery, missile tests, things being deliberately launched into the sky. A prohibited area, marked with the letter P, is the harder category. It means no, not ask nicely, not file the right form and wait for a slot. The flight of aircraft is simply prohibited, for reasons the FAA states in its own regulations only as security or reasons associated with the national welfare. There are very few true prohibited areas in the entire country. Each one exists because something underneath it was judged important enough or dangerous enough to close the sky above it permanently. Here are 7 of them, counting down from 7 to 1. And everything you are about to hear comes from public FAA charts, from the Federal Register, and from the government's own declassified records. Because the genuinely strange part of this story is not that these places are hidden. It is that they are printed, in the open, on maps that anyone can buy for a few dollars, and almost nobody ever thinks to look. Number 7. Camp David, Maryland. Officially, it does not even go by that name. On the books, it is Naval Support Facility Thurmont, a presidential retreat tucked into the wooded hills of the Catoctin Mountains northwest of Washington. And it has served American presidents since Franklin Roosevelt used it as a wartime refuge from the heat and pressure of the capital. It has been the setting for some of the most consequential diplomacy of the 20th century, including the Camp David Accords, the 1978 peace framework between Egypt and Israel that President Jimmy Carter brokered on that very ground over 13 tense days. Presidents have hosted foreign leaders there, made war decisions there, and simply disappeared from public view there. The airspace above it is Prohibited Area P40. And P40 has an unusual property that almost no other piece of American airspace shares. It breathes. Most of the time, it is a modest bubble, a circle of prohibited sky only about 3 nautical miles across, sitting quietly over the trees. But when the president is physically present at Camp David, the FAA issues a temporary flight restriction that inflates that bubble outward to a radius of 10 nautical miles, swallowing a large stretch of rural Maryland in a single stroke. The no-fly zone is not fixed to the geography. It is tied to a single human being. When the president arrives by helicopter, the sky closes further. When he leaves, it relaxes again. There is something quietly remarkable in knowing that the airspace over a patch of forest expands and contracts depending on exactly who happens to be standing underneath it that afternoon, that the map of the sky rearranges itself around the movements of one person. Number 6. Naval Submarine Base, Kings Bay, Georgia. On the quiet coastal marshes near the town of St. Mary's, close to the Florida line, sits the home port of the United States Atlantic Fleet's Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. These are the vessels that carry a substantial share of the country's seaborne nuclear deterrent, the leg of the arsenal designed to hide beneath the ocean and survive a first strike so that it can always answer one. It is one of only a couple of places on the entire Atlantic coast where these particular submarines are based, which makes the 16,000 acres of Georgia marsh around it some of the most strategically important ground in the hemisphere. For years after the attacks of September 11th, the sky above Kings Bay was closed only by a temporary flight restriction, the same emergency measure thrown up over countless sensitive sites in that anxious period. But in early 2006, at the formal request of the Navy, the FAA made it permanent, establishing Prohibited Area P50 directly over the base. The paperwork is genuinely fully public. You can read the Federal Register entry yourself, including the objections filed by pilots' associations who argued the restriction was heavier than it needed to be and would strangle a nearby civilian airport, and you can read the FAA's blunt response to them. Other military installations, the agency acknowledged, sit right next to civilian airports without this kind of protection. But those installations, it wrote, do not have the same operational requirements or the same mission as the Naval Submarine Base at Kings Bay. Translated out of careful bureaucratic language, the meaning is simple. Most bases are not tying up the nuclear deterrent at the dock. This one is. Nothing crosses that sky without authorization, and authorization is not something a curious weekend pilot is ever going to be handed. Number 5. Naval Base Kitsap, Bangor, Washington. Across Puget Sound from Seattle lies the Pacific counterpart to Kings Bay, and by most public accounts it is home to one of the largest concentrations of deployed nuclear weapons anywhere in the United States, possibly the single largest. The Trident submarines based here, together with the warheads stored in guarded bunkers on the site itself, are believed to represent an enormous fraction of the entire American arsenal, gathered in one place within clear sight of a major American metropolitan area. It is an extraordinary thing to sit that much destructive power that close to a city, and to do it so routinely that the people of Seattle rarely give it a thought. And the airspace above it carries a designation that causes genuine confusion every single time it comes up, because it sounds like a typographical error. It is Prohibited Area 51. That is P51, the real, literal, Prohibited Area 51, designated by the FAA, written into the Federal Register over a submarine base in Washington State. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the famous place out in the Nevada desert, which, as we will see in just a moment, is not even a prohibited area at all. So here is a small piece of aviation trivia that is entirely true and sounds completely invented. The actual Prohibited Area 51 in the United States guards nuclear submarines just outside Seattle. The place the whole world calls Area 51 has a completely different code. The number that has launched 1,000 conspiracy theories and gift shops is in the FAA's own filing system, quietly assigned to the Pacific Northwest, and almost no one who repeats the phrase has any idea. Number 4. Pantex, near Amarillo, Texas. Out on the flat, wind-scoured Texas Panhandle is a facility most Americans have never heard of, despite the fact that essentially the entire United States nuclear stockpile has, at one point or another in its existence, passed through it. Pantex is the plant where the nation's nuclear weapons are physically assembled, and in the decades since the Cold War began winding down, it is also where they are taken apart. Warheads are built here, maintained here, inspected here, retired here, and disassembled here. A great deal of the slow, delicate, genuinely dangerous work of managing an aging and shrinking arsenal happens on this one broad patch of Texas prairie, behind fences that give almost nothing away. The airspace above it is Prohibited Area P-47, and the logic requires no decoding whatsoever. When the ground beneath you is the place where nuclear weapons are literally assembled and broken down, component by delicate component, the government is not remotely inclined to allow aircraft to pass overhead, and it has drawn a hard, permanent line in the sky that says exactly that. What makes Pantex quietly striking is not drama, but its opposite. It is an ordinary-looking industrial site in the middle of cattle country, the kind of low, spread-out complex you would drive past on the highway without a second glance, and yet it sits beneath some of the most carefully guarded airspace in the country, precisely because of what is so patiently and carefully handled inside those plain, unremarkable buildings. The most dangerous place is often the one that looks like nothing at all. Number 3. White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico. This one is vast, almost beyond intuition. White Sands is the largest military installation in the entire United States by land area, a stretch of desert larger than several states combined. And rather than a single prohibited bubble, it is covered by a whole sprawling complex of restricted areas. This is the R side of the distinction we started with, and it is worth pausing on because White Sands shows you precisely what that R is for. The airspace is restricted because of what happens beneath it and moves up through it. Missiles have been tested here since the very dawn of American rocketry, fired up into that clear desert sky as a matter of ordinary routine, week after week, for generations. It is also, and this is no small footnote, the place where the atomic age itself began. In July of 1945, at a location on the range now known as Trinity, the first nuclear weapon in human history was detonated, a test that lit the pre-dawn desert brighter than the noon sun and permanently changed the century that followed it. The restricted airspace over White Sands exists for a reason that is more physical than secretive. Things are fired into this sky on purpose, at speed, all the time, and an aircraft drifting through at the wrong instant is not so much a security breach as a potential casualty. That is the honest heart of the difference between the two kinds of line we have been tracing. Restricted airspace, more often than not, means the danger is real, visible, and rising off the ground toward you. Prohibited airspace, more often than not, means the thing being protected is a secret. One guards you from what is happening. The other guards what is happening from you. Number 2. Air Force Plant 42, Palmdale, California. On the edge of the Mojave Desert, sharing its very runways with a modest regional passenger airport, is the place where America's most secret aircraft are, quite literally, born. Plant 42 is a sprawling, government-owned aircraft manufacturing complex, more than 8 million square feet of covered floor space, and it is the longtime home of Lockheed's legendary Skunk Works, the Advanced Projects Division responsible for some of the most famous classified aircraft ever built. The U-2 spy plane. The SR-71 Blackbird, still one of the fastest air-breathing aircraft the world has ever produced. The F-117 stealth fighter, whose very silhouette was a guarded state secret for years. And today, in the guarded hangars at Palmdale, Northrop Grumman is assembling the B-21 Raider, the new stealth bomber intended to fly deep into this century. The airspace over Plant 42 is restricted, part of the enormous R-2508 complex, tied to nearby Edwards Air Force Base, and the restriction has a very particular job that sets it apart from most of the others on this list. It is not primarily there to stop an attack. It is there to stop a camera. When a brand new classified aircraft is rolled out of its hangar to make its very first flight, the single thing the Air Force least wants sitting overhead is a light plane carrying a photographer with a long lens, ready to publish the shape of a secret to the world. In recent years, the facility has even experienced a rash of mysterious drone incursions, serious enough to prompt fresh, dedicated flight restrictions. The line in the sky over Palmdale exists so that the future of American air power can lift off the runway for the first time without anyone watching who was not expressly meant to be there. It is secrecy, enforced not against bombs, but against curiosity itself. And number 1, Groom Lake, Nevada, the place the entire world calls Area 51. Here is what is actually on the record, because the documented truth is stranger and far more interesting than all the mythology that has been stacked on top of it. For decades, the government of the United States would not so much as confirm that the base even existed. It appeared on none of the government's own official maps. It was where the U-2 and the Blackbird were secretly flight tested, far from prying eyes, and where, by every credible account, the military has continued to develop aircraft it has no intention of ever revealing to the public. The government did not formally acknowledge the site in plain and printed language until 2013, when the CIA released a declassified history of the U-2 program that finally named Groom Lake outright in text that anyone could read. The airspace tells you everything that 50 years of official silence refused to. It is charted as Restricted Area R4808N, and its vertical limit is listed with a single telling word: unlimited. There is no altitude high enough to legally pass over the top of it. A commercial airliner at full cruising height is still inside the box. And unlike most restricted areas, where a military pilot can at least radio a request to cross, this one is effectively sealed to everyone, the military very much included. Air Force and Navy pilots have found themselves in serious trouble for straying across that boundary by mistake. The people who work there do not drive up to a front gate each morning. They fly in aboard a fleet of unmarked white passenger jets out of Las Vegas, operating under the radio call sign Janet, aircraft that take off, vanish into that column of restricted sky, and set down somewhere the public is simply not permitted to follow. Notice what the number one entry is not. It is not at its core a story about aliens, and it never needed to be. The documented reality that there is a fully functioning military airbase, which the government of the United States declined to admit existed for half a century, wrapped in airspace sealed from the desert floor straight up to infinity, is more genuinely remarkable than anything ever painted on a gift shop poster or whispered on late-night radio. The secret was never little green men. The secret was the secrecy itself, and it is drawn right there on the public aviation chart. A hole cut into the map of America with a code number sitting where the explanation should be. That is the thread running through all 7 of these places, and it is worth naming plainly. They are not rumors, and they are not legends passed around the internet at 2 in the morning. They are lines the government drew in the open air and then published, deliberately, for every pilot in the country to see and to obey. A retreat in the Maryland woods that grows a 10-mile bubble the very moment the president steps off the helicopter. 2 submarine bases standing guard over the sea-based half of the nuclear arsenal, one on each coast, each with its own sealed sky. A quiet plant in Texas where the warheads are assembled and one by one taken back apart. A missile range spread across the desert where the atomic age first exploded into being. A hangar complex in California where the next secret aircraft is already taking shape in the dark. And a base in the Nevada desert with no ceiling at all on its airspace and, for 50 long years, no name the government would even say out loud. You do not need clearance, or connections, or special permission to find any of this. Every one of these places appears on public aeronautical charts, and every designation, P40, P50, P51, P47, R4808N, is a matter of open public record, sitting in federal documents that are available to you right now. The airspace is prohibited. The information about it never was. The only thing that has kept most of it feeling like a secret through all these years is that almost nobody ever thinks to simply look up.